Hellblade 2 could be arriving early in 2024, according to Phil Spencer. And before we look at what he is saying and the potential timeline given his verbiage, as well as things he said in the past about making it seem as though Hellblade 2 is one of the games slated for 2024, I want to talk about why I hope that's not the case, or that if it does come out in 2024, I hope it comes out later in the year. I've actually been following this game for quite a while. Hellblade is one of my all-time favorite games. It might be my all-time favorite game if you really press me to choose just one. I feel like it is one of the best games as a piece of art, as something that is sort of put together holistically, from the sound design to the intention of the story to the voice acting to the setting and the combat, all of it, the puzzle solving. I absolutely love the game, and I've played it, I think, 3 or 4 times all the way through. And because I've been following it for such a long time, I know when they started full production, or roughly when they were not in full production, and that's why I'm concerned about the timing here. It's like, I don't want this game to come out before it's ready. Now, current estimates, according to Google, has Ninja Theory coming in at about 120 employees. That's not a very large studio, so you have to think about that in relationship to, you know, how fast a game can be cranked out. If they're trying to do things ambitiously with the Unreal Engine, as we've seen in some of the early looks at the game, that could take even more time. Some of the games coming out recently in Unreal 5 have been struggling. It's like almost as if teams are sort of still figuring out how to optimize and how to get things to run well. And most of the footage we've seen so far of Hellblade 2 looks incredible, and I'm really excited. Even when they showed up at the Xbox showcase, people were being critical, and they're like, that wasn't gameplay. No, that was gameplay. There are moments like that in Hellblade that are very cerebral and experiential, and they want you to sort of almost have like an out-of-body experience, so it's not meant to be always high action. So I want to just give you a rough timeline before we look at Phil Spencer's comments, and we're going to do that by looking at something from Games Radar. And the important thing to note is the timing here. And I remember people being upset when they heard this. You can see here it's June 17th of 2021, so roughly 2.5 years ago, okay? And Hellblade 2 has yet to enter full production, Ninja Theory says in new teaser reel. Now, the reason people were frustrated about this is because the game had already been announced a couple years prior. Everybody was really anticipating this. They had done a couple of tweets and a couple of things about recording and almost like some dev diaries. So then when we find out, hey man, it's been a couple of years and you guys are still not in full production, what exactly is going on? You know, and I'm all about teams taking their time. So if you come down here and you actually look at what's going on, you know, the studio founder is the one making these comments. What we're doing right now is building a good chunky slice of the game before we then move into full production to build out the rest. Hellblade was very special to us, and we didn't want to do a straight sequel. We wanted to do something extra special, and so we're making our lives as difficult as possible in that pursuit. So this kind of language also sort of is one of the reasons I'm a little concerned about the timeline, because if you think about it, this is in the middle of 2021. And what they're currently doing in the middle of 2021 is building a good chunk, building a good slice. And this is not uncommon. You use vertical slices or early slices of the game to set the tone, the animation. You even go maybe through some tech tests internally, and maybe even, you know, put this before the publisher or whoever's in charge, say, hey, this is what we're building, this is the timeline, this is where we're going to end up. And then you use that as your baseline to build out the rest of the game. And that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to move then into full production. So what that means is they were still in, you know, sort of early stages, early phases of the game 2.5 years ago. So if you consider that timeline and you're like, oh, well, Hellblade 2, I remember people telling me that Hellblade 2 was coming out this year in 2023. It was going to be like a surprise drop. I saw somebody speculating, oh, they might do a shadow drop. They'll just drop it suddenly, you know, at the Game Awards. I'm like, there is literally no way they can do that. I cannot see this game being ready to go after just 2.5 years of full production. And again, that's only if they entered full production right after this interview. It's unlikely that they did. So what that means is sometime later in 2021, hopefully, they entered full production, which means they would have had all of 2022 and all of 2023, 2 solid years of full production. Well, what I typically want to see for games of quality, games of size, games that are doing things that are ambitious, or maybe they haven't done before, I want to see a minimum of like 5-year development. You know, I'm pushing for 5 and 6 years a lot of the times. People get really irritated, like, oh, we heard about this game so long ago, why isn't it coming out yet? I'm like, listen, give the devs as much time as necessary. And obviously they went through 2020 like everybody else and the struggles there, but since they weren't in full production, I would not imagine that they lost a ton of productivity. It's not like they tried to ramp up and start building the game in 2020 and in 2021 and then suddenly, had to pump the brakes and work from home and everything else. So fast forward to now, we have articles, same outlet, Games Radar, saying the following: Hellblade 2 seemingly set to release soon, as Phil Spencer teases we don't have much longer to wait. The Xbox boss has praised developer Ninja Theory and says he loves how the game is coming together. So let's read on here. He has hinted that Hellblade fans won't have to wait much longer for the next chapter in Senua's story. In a recent interview, Spencer was asked which upcoming releases he was most excited about. Top of his list is Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, and this is what he says: I just love Ninja Theory and all the work that they do. Their craftsmanship is fantastic. I love how that game is coming together. In addition to sharing his enthusiasm for Hellblade 2, Spencer teases that the wait for the highly anticipated sequel is almost over. We don't have that much longer to wait. Now, you may have seen the clip floating around. This is what they're pulling it from here. And, Idle Sloth is talking about how he's currently playing Persona 5, Spear T, and Starfield. And then his most anticipated game is Hellblade 2, and we don't have much longer to wait. Now, there was another interview where he mentioned games that were coming, and he mentioned Avowed and Hellblade 2 kind of together. And so many people are looking to 2024 and assuming those are going to be two of the big titles. Now, Phil Spencer has also said that he wants one big game at quality every quarter. And he said in the Kind of Funny interview, the infamous interview where he said they couldn't out-console Sony, there was actually good stuff in that interview. It wasn't just about, ammunition for a console war. It was, hey, we're finally to the point where we can do that. He's been really pushing for that cadence and that rhythm for Game Pass. Now, I have my own thoughts on whether or not that's a good idea. I have, recently been pretty critical of Disney and how they wanted a new Star Wars game every 6 months, and it was clear that Jedi Survivor came out way too early, and once they finally got that thing running well on console, the director left. That's a big loss in my mind. I think that Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor aren't just good games, they're good Star Wars games, they're good Star Wars story, and losing him, I think that's a loss. That's a big loss, and I attribute that to Disney. I fault them for that. I imagine they're pushing for the next game to hit a timeline that's probably not healthy or good, and it's going to be another, rough launch. And so when I see similar phrasing coming from Phil Spencer about that, and then I look at Hellblade 2, and I look at the timing, and I look at oh wow, middle of 2021, they weren't even full production. I really hope that he's not pulling a Disney here. I hope he's not going to Ninja Theory and saying, hey, we need your game in 2024. It needs to be, when is your game going to be ready? And Phil says this a lot to the public. He wants creatives to be able to take their time and really own their vision and own their games. He talked about that with Starfield. We want them to own their dates and own their times. And I'm here to tell you, I really hope he's saying something that's accurate, and that's how these developers are treated in the background, because I have a really hard time believing that a team of 120 people jumped to a new or an updated engine and are attempting to do things that are very ambitious with the engine, and they're going to be able to do that in roughly 3 years' time. Like, that to me seems unlikely, which is, I think, a cause for concern. And the reason I'm so concerned is because I'm heavily invested in Hellblade. I want Hellblade to do really well. Now, people are anticipating potentially seeing or hearing something at the Game Awards. The article continues here. Hellblade 2 is already slated to launch sometime in 2024, and Spencer's comment suggests it could arrive in the early part of next year. This is why people are thinking oh, it's going to be early 2024, because it's already been heavily hinted to be coming out in 2024. There's no concrete roadmap. Xbox didn't do that this time around. They didn't say, here's everything coming in the next 12 months. That ended up really hurting them, because more than half of the games didn't make it on time. Some have been completely pushed out of 2023, like Ark as an example. And so they really kind of spoke out of turn, spoke about a lot of games, a lot of studios, and a lot of titles, and none of that happened. They said everything in this showcase is coming out in the next 12 months. One of the games shown was Silksong. So it's like, I think, are looking at a very different approach now. They're not putting that big timeline out there. They're not putting rigid lines to say, hey, this is everything you can expect. But it's been heavily hinted that, oh no, this one's coming. And so a lot of people are looking now, I think, for roadmaps. We're in the end of the year, and the Game Awards will probably be a time where we get some really, really good looks at what's coming in 2024. And that's great for Keighley, right? A lot of studios, a lot of publishers and platforms now are going to be looking to that event to really sort of vision cast for what's coming next year. So we may see Hellblade there. And right here they say, given the timing, we could see this game make an appearance at the Game Awards 2023, which takes place next week on December the 7th with a new trailer that potentially reveals the release date. I could see that happening, right? And they'll outline that if they do. Again, I personally want these games to have as much time as they possibly need. I've even been saying recently that I hope game marketing continues to shift to, hey, here's everything coming in the next 12 to 18 months. I don't need to hear about a game 6 or 7 years before I'm going to be able to play it. We're not in that world anymore. There's just no reason to do that. You're putting too much pressure on the devs, and this is a concern I have for Hellblade 2, right? They come out, they say something, I believe it was 2019 was the first time they said anything confirming the game was coming, and now if it comes out in 2024, everybody is going to have this idea in their head that, oh, that game cooked for 5 years, when it looks like it may be cooked for 3. And that right there is a perception problem. Everybody's going to say, this game was announced such a long time ago, it's got to be ready by now. I actually had people saying that to me when they're like, dude, come on, it's been 4 years. Where's the game? Where's the game? I said, you need to pay attention to the interviews. You need to listen to what they're saying. If they're not in full production yet, you cannot consider 2019 sort of the beginning. And I think that's something that's been happening with game announcements, is that the gaming community and gamers, sort of that look at these showcases and look at these announcements, they start to sort of conflate an announcement with the beginning of development. And this, I think, is a danger. So that's why I'm fully in support of shorter marketing windows. You don't need to tell me about the game until that thing's ready to go. Because when you're in the final 12 months, you're going to get a more accurate release date. The studio's going to know, yes, we can ship this in 9 months, 10 months, whatever, and give you a nice hard date. This would minimize delays. You would not be having as many of these odd delays where they delay a game for a year or half a year or something like that. And you're like, well, how much could they really do in that small amount of time? Like Kill the Justice League doesn't look almost any different than what we originally saw. I think it looks fun. It's kind of a throwaway party game with your friends. I understand people's disappointment with the way that game turned out, but it doesn't look any different. And the delay window is incredibly short, so I wouldn't expect significant changes. And on that same token, I would not expect 120 size staff employee, Ninja Theory, to be able to really crank out an excellent, amazing game in 3 years' time, right? And right here, you can see that even Matt Booty is echoing something that I just talked about. Sorry, wrong scene there. Earlier this year, Matt Booty, president of game content and studios at Xbox, revealed that fans can expect a major release from one of Xbox Studios 4 times a year. We've got a goal of a big game 4 times a year, he said. So every 3 months, we've got something new coming out. So alongside Hellblade 2, Xbox's offerings for 2024 include Avowed, Towerborn, a co-op action game from the team behind the brilliant Banner Saga trilogy. So, and again, Phil said a big game at quality, and I really hope those last 2 words are as important as the first couple of words, right? It's not just, a big game, every 3 months. It needs to be a big game at quality so that we can get a good lineup for Xbox. They really struggled at the beginning of this generation, and I don't consider 2023 a big year for them. Starfield did well, but the other titles that they trotted out just did not do well with the user scores, and I don't think have a banner year yet, and we're looking for maybe Hellblade 2 to help with that. And as a big fan, I got to say I'm concerned, and I hope it comes out as late as possible to give them as much time as possible. What do you think? Leave a comment below. These usually roll over into a members-only debrief. That's something you can do to support the channel directly. For $5 a month, you get into my extra content as well as my Discord. If you don't want to do the membership, make sure you hit subscribe, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.